Today, we are talking about the 6 possible reasons why a home comes back to market or why it falls out of contract. When a home comes back to market or falls out of contract, all that basically is telling you is the home canceled between the previous buyer and seller. They weren't able to have a meeting of the minds where they were able to make it to a successful close. And that could be for a number of reasons. And we're just going to talk about the 6 most common. And number 1 is very obvious. Because of an inspection, buyers have due diligence time to review a property to make sure that the home is free from major defects or issues. And if a buyer uncovers a major structural issue, a roofing issue, or something of that nature, then the buyer is within their right to cancel. Even if the seller's like, no, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it. The buyer might be like, I don't think I want to buy the house. If this is wrong, and I know this is wrong, what else might go wrong with the home? You can see why, even if the seller agrees to fix it, the buyer may still back out. And likewise, the seller could be like, that's pretty expensive. I'm trying to get rid of this house, so take it as is. It happens. Sellers know that their house needs repair beyond their financial ability. But usually in those circumstances, that's disclosed up front and it's priced according. But most of the time when you see a home fall out, it's because there's something that has happened, and it's not always about the inspection report. For instance, it could be about the appraisal. Let's say that buyer and seller agree to purchase a property. They agree to sell it to this buyer, and this buyer agrees to buy it for $350,000. And when the lender sends the appraiser out, the home comes back valued at $330,000. That's a $20,000 deficit, and the seller may say, "Hey, I still want you to pay $350,000," and the buyer's like, I'm not going to pay a dime over the appraised value. And so if the agents aren't able to get the buyer and seller to negotiate, or the seller just agrees to price it right at the appraised value, buyer and seller can walk away. Seller doesn't have to sell it for a lower value. Buyer doesn't have to buy it for the higher value. And then in the middle are the agents trying to negotiate a price that's acceptable to both of them. But sometimes the seller's like, $350,000, and the buyer's like, $330,000. So we're really, really far apart. We can't make that work. We just cancel. And then the buyer tries again, and the seller brings the house back to market and hopes to maybe get a better appraisal, but that won't work if we'll get into that. That'll be a whole nother story. Another reason that a home might cancel, I would say reason number 3, would be because of the HOA. Well, first of all, I know everyone hates their HOA. It's a fact. I think it's just an agreed upon fact that everyone hates their HOA. Don't tell me what to do with my house. That's a stupid rule. I have 6 cars, and I'm not allowed to park in the street or the driveway. It's not going to happen. If a buyer sees that rule, they're going to be like, I don't think I want to buy it. It's not for me. It's not a good fit. And that's okay. But there's other things in the HOA docs that might make a buyer cancel, and it might not have anything to do with the rules. If you go through your resale package with your agent, it's important that you look at the financials of the HOA. So the HOA is required to give you their reserve study, their financial report, their balance sheet, and all their rules and regulations. And so when you're looking at those documents, you may be disclosed that they're in litigation, like major litigation, which is going to cost thousands of dollars, whether they win or lose, but especially if they lose. So that could mean an increase in your assessments. They might not have any money in their savings account or their reserve account. And the reserve account is set aside to do the repairs of playground equipment, the community property. So if there's no money set in the reserve account for them to take care of the maintenance issues as they arise, your assessments are going to go up. And if something major happens, they may even have to do a special assessment. That's not something that anyone is looking forward to. Like, I want to buy this property and it's in financial disaster. It's a dumpster fire. That's not a community you want to buy into. So there's a lot of important things that you look at in an HOA package. And that is also one of the reasons why people back out. They look at that and they say, yeah, that's not for me. That's not going to happen. I'm not the one. And they move on to another property. So another reason why the property could come back to market is because the buyer didn't qualify. And what does that mean? The buyer didn't qualify to get a loan. I thought they were pre-approved. Right. But Let's say the buyer loses their job mid-transaction. Now they have no income and they have no way to purchase this home. Another way would be if the buyer gets cold feet at closing. They've gone through all their contingencies. They have no reason to not move forward other than they don't feel good about moving forward. They're like, this isn't a good decision. I'm overthinking this. I'm panicking. I'm going to walk away. I'm done. And that's happened before, not often, but it can happen where the buyer just says, I'm not going to buy this and I will lose my earnest money rather than make this mistake that they deem they're making. And that's through no fault of the sellers. The seller didn't have anything to do with the fact that the buyer was having a panic attack or what have you. They just decided this wasn't the right option for them. So sometimes when a contract falls apart, it's not because the seller is hiding something or whatever. It really could be because the buyer didn't qualify. And I've seen it happen. So that's another way. And then probably the last way that I've seen that a deal falls apart is because the seller gets drug into some sort of litigation and there's a judgment filed against their property, even midway through the transaction, that now no longer allows them to sell the home. There's a cloud on title. And what a cloud on title means is that there is a judgment recorded against the property, whether that be in a court or a private lien, that is not able to be satisfied. And it might not be through any fault of the sellers. So for instance, there could be a lien recorded falsely and someone's trying to extort you. That is very rare, but it has happened, and it has happened to be false, a false lien recorded that tried to stop the closing. That's a story for another day. But it can happen with a legitimate judgment. There could be anything that attaches to that property that the seller cannot get rid of, and it creates this cloud on title. It cannot be satisfied. Therefore, free and clear title cannot be conveyed to the buyer. Therefore, it has to cancel. When the seller gets that judgment remediated and handled and clear, they could put the house back on the market for sale. But until then, they're not able to sell the home. So those are the main ways that a home can fall out of contract. So it's not always like, ooh, there's something wrong with this house. It's back on the market. It's not always that something's wrong. There could be a litany of things that have happened which have forced this home to come back to market.